are watching Simon Says on Mtgo Academy featuring Simon Götzen.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. I'm Simon Götzen and I'm recording Simon Says for mtgoacademy.com. This is my intro video and we have a new set not only on the horizon but also in our hands. Journey into Nyx is there, completing the Theros limited block format, which means that sealed deck is now 2-2-2, drafts are now 1-1-1, and that's always exciting because we do already know a lot of the format. We've learned the ins and outs of Theros only, of Theros and Born of the Gods, and now we have 3 sets to work with. Some things stay the same, some things change, and it's kind of the goal of the new set to make things exciting again for the draft players. And it has to be our goal to understand what's going on with the new cards and the new mechanics. So today I want to do a really simple exercise which draws upon what I've learned about the format through playing and drafting, and also from moderating, commenting on Grand Prix Warsaw, which was last weekend. There's also the Pro Tour coming up, so that will fuel all of this and kickstart us if we don't yet know what we truly want to be doing. I suppose we do know what we're doing, but we have no idea if it's actually the best we can do in the new format. At least that's my perspective. I know there's always a lot of people that think that after 2 or 3 games or 2 or 3 drafts they know everything there is to know about a format, but in my experience that's generally not true, even for simpler formats than this one, and it's definitely not a simple format. Alright, the exercise for today is to find the top 2 commons for each color in Journey into Nyx, and that is in a first pick, first pack situation. So what do you actually want to start your drafts with? Of course there's going to be better mythics, better rares, better uncommons sometimes, but if you have to decide between commons, which one do you take, which is kind of the most important thing I think for drafting, as it will influence your own decision making down the line in pack 2, 3, 4 and so on, and also it will allow you to read signals better, signals being what's being passed to you from the right, and it will allow you to send better signals because you will have a better idea of where cards might be positioned or not. Alright, so with that said, we can start with the white cards here, and there is let's see, 13 white commons, and we have to reduce that down to 2. Now in a first pick first pack situation, in general removal and creatures are going to be at a premium. It's quite rare that you start your drafts with a trick. In Theros sometimes you wanted to first pick let's say God's Willing, but still it was much more likely that you wanted to start with the Ring Street Rider, for example. So this is just me looking at Ajani's presence and yeah, not really thinking that this is a card to first pick. Now don't think that I'm going to throw all of these. I want this to be rather sweet and short, in particular because the format is not fully explored yet, so even my evaluations are changing constantly, and I just want to give a general idea of how to approach this and what my current view of the format is. So Ajani's Presence is not a card that I would want to first pick. I think you can, in particular if you think that drafting heroic decks is where you want to be. A Chrome Mastiff I think is a lot better. The format has slowed down a little bit, and creating largish creatures is still very, very important. White-black I think has gained a ton, so applying white-black control with tappers is certainly an option. So a Chrome Mastiff is up there in my opinion. I'll just write that down, not because it's the best common, but because it might be. So then there's Armament of Nyx, which is really unexciting. Those 3 cards in row 2 are pretty easy. It's pretty easy to see that the middle one is unplayable. The other 2 are solid creatures, but not first pick material. That doesn't mean you will never first pick them, but it would only be out of very, very weak packs. I don't like Laguna Band Trailblazer. I think that it's actually quite a trap to play a 0-4 hero. It just never puts on pressure on your opponent, so I'm not a fan. Oppressive Race would count as removal. but the fact that your opponent can pay mana to prevent that makes me think that I don't want to first pick Oppressive Race. It's also not a card that I want too many of. Maybe one is fine, but I don't want too many of them. Alright, 13 was a lie, Repriseless and uncommon. It was a common when it was first printed, I believe, so that's why it shows up here. That means there's Rescuer Swiftclaw, Stonewaste Fortifier, and Supply Line Cranes left, and those are among the most powerful white commons. I would say that Supply Line Crane certainly qualifies, and looking at the 2-drops, if we say that 2-drops in general have become a bit less important, then the Stonewaste Fortifier is really just a Traveling Philosopher with a small upside. On the other hand, Rescuer Swiftclaw profits from a slower format in a certain sense, because there's going to be less small creatures to trade with it, whereas it deals huge chunks of damage and trades with your opponent's 3 or 4 drops. So Rescuer Swiftclaw I actually think should be on this list. I do know that I like it more than other players though. When rating these 3 cards, I think that Supply Line Cranes being first and then one of the other 2 would be the general consensus, or would have been the general consensus after the pre-release. After playing a bit more, I think that Supply Line Cranes, while good, are actually not as great as they look. Somehow you are committing to a color that wants to be aggressive by picking a 5-mana flyer with a great ability. I'm not complaining about that. I'm always happy to have Supply Line Cranes in my deck, and I would love to have 2 as well, but I'm just not convinced that it's the right approach to the format. That said, I also don't think that just picking vanilla 2-drops is a great way to win games here. I think that a Crone Mastiff should be the card that you want most in white. That does depend on my preferences. I think that a Crone Mastiff just works better in the decks that I'm trying to build, but I'm always happy to have one in my deck, and if the games just go a bit longer and you get to untap with the Mastiff, it's just a really strong ability. I personally would love to put the Swiftclaw above the Supply Line Cranes, because I think that Supply Line Cranes is a bit of a trap, but I haven't gathered enough data to do so. So I will stick to the Supply Line Cranes as the second best white first pick, common first pick for now. I just don't like how we have a 4-drop and a 5-drop here in a color that really shines when it's aggressive, which kind of makes me wonder if white is rather weak to compensate for its power in Born of the Gods and Theros, or if white is just a bit more complicated than I make it out to be here, and that we kind of have to figure out what to draft in white. So I kind of started with one of the most difficult colors, I think, in Journey into Nyx when it comes to the commons. But there's 4 more colors, so let's get to it. And here we go with blue. I'm going to switch to the visual spoiler again. And blue is also quite interesting, and that's mostly because of aerial formation. How good is aerial formation? It is the blue Strife card, just like Johnny's Presence is the white Strife card. Sometimes it's going to be absurdly good, sometimes it's going to be pretty mediocre, because giving a creature +1/+1 and flying for 1 mana is not amazing. For 4 mana it's a bit better, and I think aerial formation is really, really tough to evaluate. I still don't know if I really like it or not. I think it actually does enough things to be put on here as for consideration, but I'm not sure if it's really a card that I would be happy to first pick. Maybe I'm conservative, but I like to just pick creatures instead and worry about tricks later. Or to put it another way, if I don't know that I'm going to be in an aggressive archetype, then I think that aerial formation is just not very good. So overall, I have mixed feelings about the formation. Also because white-blue will often have a lot of evasion anyway. Blue-red also has a lot of tricks and spells that it wants to play as well. It just needs some good creatures. Aerial formation looks really good in blue-green. I'll give it that. And in blue-black, I don't want such an aggressive card, usually. So overall, I'm not the biggest fan. Cloaked Siren is very solid, and in a lot of formats that would constitute a good blue first pick, but as we will see, there's just too many of them. And that's because there's Hubris, which is just the set's Voyage's End, basically. And there's still, well, Rise of Eagles is probably doesn't qualify, but there's Sigiled Starfish and Warring Siren. So looking at all these options, I think it's fair to say that Warring Siren has more potential than Cloaked Siren. I'm actually not sure if Warring Siren is as good as I first thought, and I'm also not sure if Cloaked Siren might not be better than I first thought, because having Flash is a really powerful ability in a format where you get to keep open grip tides and bounce spells and combat tricks. Alright, I've said that I don't like Aerial Formation too much. I've said that Hubris is basically the set's Voyage's End, so that should put it on top, right? Well, I think that honor goes to Sigiled Starfish. And that's because it's a 2-drop with 3 toughness that you want to have as many as possible of, and that just win you the game the longer it goes. So I can't put it any other way. I think that Sigiled Starfish is the best blue common, and it might actually be the best common to start your draft with. I know that's saying a lot, but Sigiled Starfish is basically a Merfolk Looter with more toughness and a slightly less powerful ability. I really like it. The more I've played with it, the more I've been convinced that it's the real deal. I'm going to put Hubris as number 2, and Cloaked Siren and Warring Siren will have to get deleted here. I have a feeling that I like Cloaked Siren better than Warring Siren already, but that's also because I think that drafting Heroic has become more difficult, and I'm also personally not the biggest fan of the all-inish Heroic decks. So take that with a grain of salt. Next up is Black. And here we go. Bloodcrest Hoplite was all the rage when the set was first spoiled, and people were calling it one of the best black commons because it just had the potential to grow. I think that the second ability is just very unlikely to be relevant, especially because Bloodcrest Hoplite is best if you just pump it early and often, and it just hasn't really lived up to the hype. Creating a 3/2, for example, with some kind of aura in the early game is just not that impressive on a creature that doesn't have evasion, and that's also in the color that has some trouble creating aggressive starts and creatures. There is a Feast of Dreams, which is very solid, of course. I do like to have at least one of them in my decks, but I'm not too sure how many of them I want to draft, so they are a bit worse than an unconditional removal spell would be. On the other hand, there's a lot of constellation creatures, and enchanted creatures are still the best thing people can do. So I still like Feast of Dreams quite a bit. Dreadbringer Lampettes is a card that I think is underrated, but not first pick quality. Then there is Nyx Infusion, which I think for a removal spell is really too weak. You can't first pick it without the danger of passing too many good cards. So that basically leaves Grim Guardian and Pharika's Chosen. Now Pharika's Chosen is effectively a Sedge Scorpion, but in black, which is kind of the control color, and I have to say I love Pharika's Chosen. I think it's just really nice to have something with Death Touch. I think it wouldn't be bad to first pick it either, because it is an early play that lets you survive. It can also attack once the board is gummed up and your opponent only has creatures that he doesn't really want to trade with the Chosen. So that said, there is still Grim Guardian, and Grim Guardian has an ability that means that you want as many Grim Guardians as possible. Also, a 1/4 in this format isn't particularly bad, and that means Grim Guardian is the first card that we are seeing that allows you to really draft a deck around it, draft a combo deck around Grim Guardian. And because of that, I actually think that Grim Guardian might be the best black first pick, not because it's stronger than Feast of Dreams or Pharika's Chosen, but because you want to have as many as possible. You don't want your neighbors to get any, and you just want to know as soon as possible that you can maximize on a Grim Guardian constellation deck. Maybe black-white, maybe black-green, but even the other colors are possible. And it also triggers other constellation cards, which you can then pick up higher as a result. I think Grim Guardian is my #1 pick from black. If I had to decide between Feast of Dreams and Freaka's Chosen, I do have to say that an instant removal spell is still better than a Death Touch creature, but Freaka's Chosen is just that good. Grim Guardian, who would have thought? Next up is red, and I have to say I'm really at a loss here. Blade Tusk Boar used to be first pickable in Zendikar, and that was a very aggressive format, but in this format evasion is also still king. I just feel that paying 4 mana for a creature in red is often a bit too much, so I'm not convinced that Blade Tusk Boar is the way to go. However, looking at these cards, those aren't first pick quality, and even if Flurry of Horns is a bit better than I thought, it's still not something that I'm happy first picking. So that leaves Magma Spray. Rill of Lightning, of course, not common in this set. That leaves Magma Spray, which is a pretty easily first pickable card. I think there isn't much to say about that. It's a removal spell, and the fact that it only costs a single red means you can sometimes blow out your opponents. But we are already pretty much at the bottom of the barrel here. Starfall suffers from the same problems that red damage spells do suffer from, especially when they cost 5. And then Rouse the Mob is not really a first pick. I haven't really seen Satyr Hoplite go absolutely insane. I think that's because drafting heroic decks has become so much more difficult. I thought that Satyr Hoplite would perform exceptionally well, and I have not been convinced. A card that I do like quite a bit is Sigiled Skink. I think that just having a solid 2-drop is worth quite a lot already, and as you can see from my rating of Sigiled Starfish, I think that being able to scry on repeatedly is a lot better than you would think, similar to how a Kraos form rose in value. So to me, Sigiled Skink could actually be up here with their best red commons. Is that crazy, or is that actually something that that could be a viable drafting strategy? I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't really have the experience in red. The only card I can really think of being a contender is Blade Tusk Boar, or maybe we're all missing something and you just want to create hasty Minotaurs because black-red aggro or blue-red aggro is a thing now. I'm not sure. Let me know if you know better, or we'll just wait for the Pro Tour, and I'm sure we'll learn some interesting stuff about drafting red in this new format. Alright, one more color to talk about. Green. Well, what does green have? It has Golden Hind, and Golden Hind is Voyaging Satyr, except that it has 2 power, which makes it a lot more threatening in combat and in the early game. It does trade with X2s that your opponent might play. I think that Golden Hind is hands down the best green common, and it also competes for best common in the set in my experience. So Golden Hind is the real deal. Looking at the remaining cards, Fond of Fertility is only really great if you have it on turn 1 with the forest, and even then the creatures that ramp you are just so much better. Krufix's Insight hasn't really been great for me. Of course you will know once you have picked up a few constellation cards that this is something you want, but otherwise you can't really start a draft with it. Alright, and then there's 6 more cards. Panoply is not a first pickable card. Renowned Weaver is quite weak. I don't think that you want to aggressively be taking heroic creatures, even if they profit aggressively from the being targeted. It's far more important to get good bestow cards than creatures that grow in size, in my experience. I think Satyr Growth Dancer is actually quite good. I think it's a bit underrated, but it also has a pretty low ceiling. It will never really excel. The 2 cards that I think that are in contention for second best green common are Ravenous Lucrocota and Occult Dryads. And after playing a bit and seeing both of these in action, I have to give it to Occult Dryads. Occult Dryads on turn 3 often makes a 2-drop unblockable because it grows out of size, and then on the next turn it attacks at the 3-4. There's just a lot of enchantments in this block, and you will often have ways to make blocking really difficult for your opponent. So while the Ravenous Lucrocota does compete, I think that Occult Dryads is really good. And now there is a bit of a problem in green, and that is, if I'm drafting green, I want as many Occult Dryads as possible because they complement each other so well. I do also want as many Golden Hinds as possible because it's exactly what I want to be in my traditional green decks. If I know that I'm more aiming towards the rampy kind of strategies, then I should always pick as many Golden Hinds as possible. If I know that I also like the aggressive tempo decks, then Occult Dryads might actually be better sometimes. Now, that said, if you already have an Occult Dryads, it might actually be better to pick up more Occult Dryads rather than picking up Golden Hinds, simply because they get better in multiples, so much better in multiples. Still, I'm saying that Golden Hind is the best green common, and as I said, looking at these cards, I think the power level is actually not that high. I don't really like the white cards for what they give you as a first pick options, and even number 3, the Oresco Swiftclaw is not amazing. I love the blue cards. I think Bounce and Scrying is really good, and Sigil Starfish has completely convinced me. I love Golden Hind, and I think Occult Dryads is up there in power level. And Magma Spray has the issues that burn spells have in this format. So that leaves the Grim Guardian, which I think I would be always happy to start a draft with. And that means that Constellation is quite a bit better than I first thought. The top 5 cards, in my opinion, to first pick are the 2 blue cards, the 2 green cards, and Grim Guardian. If I'm opening a pack, that's basically what I'm looking for. So my dislike for heroic strategies, my dislike for white aggro decks does shine through here a little bit, but I hope this wasn't too biased. Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments, and I guess we'll see what the pros do in Atlanta, and there is still, hopefully, a lot of articles and videos coming out, so we'll learn this as we go and explore this format. Enjoy the draft, and let me know in the comments what the best card to first pick is in Journey into Nyx. See you next time.